Alright, 1, 2, 3, mark. Oh shit. Oh, hey. Welcome to Dirty Brushin', one of the few shows out there that's not creepy without a studio audience. I'm your host, Jonathan Jernigan, and today we're painting Spider-Man, live from the bunker. I'm of course kidding, the show is not live, it is actually very heavily edited. So like I was saying, we are painting Spider-Man, and you can go as fast or as slow as you want to through this painting, just by hitting fast forward. But like I said, I'm going to walk you through this step by step, everything that is in the final product. I'm going to show you how to do on this canvas right here. Get the shoulder, get the shoulder. Right there. Okay, let's get started. Alright, now before we actually paint anything, we want to establish where Spider-Man is going to go. Now I'm going to put him about right here, and he's going to take up most of the canvas because he's going to be the focal point of the painting. Now you're of course going to want to do this in pencil first. I'm doing mine in paint for two reasons. One, like I said, the pencil does not show up as well on canvas on the camera. And two, I'm better than you. Alright, so now the easiest thing with Spider-Man to start out with is his head. And you want us to kind of start off kind of figuring out where you want to put him. Now his head is essentially an oval that kind of comes down into a V shape. And again, you can kind of give him as strong a jaw as you want to, and don't be afraid to if you kind of go outside the lines a little bit, because remember, you can always erase what you don't like. Even if you're doing it with paint, you can just erase it and erase it and erase it. And then once you have his basic head shape on there, you want to kind of plan out where his eyes are going to go. It's like they are the most iconic part of the entire costume. Like any Spider-Man costume without those eyes just doesn't quite look right. So now his eyes are going to be kind of in the middle of the head, so about halfway between right here and right here. And again, you can make them as big or as small as you want to, and you want to start out by almost like you're drawing eyebrows. That don't connect them. And like I said, they just turn into kind of these weird, funky looking triangles that kind of curve outward along the eyes. Now I said some versions of the costume have them really big, others have them kind of small. I prefer kind of somewhere kind of in the middle. Something that looks kind of just like, and again, don't be afraid if you kind of mess up one of the lines just a little bit, because we're going to go over it. This is just a rough sketch. And again, so once you kind of have his basic head shape on there, now we're going to kind of plan out where his body's going to go. And you want to start the neck kind of right here where these eyes are, and the neck isn't too long, it's just a couple inches. Like I said, Spider-Man does have those lats right up here, so you want to kind of curve downward, kind of just like that. And again, they can be as big or small. Now once you kind of have those curves, the rest of the shoulder kind of starts almost like from the collarbone, kind of right here. And his collarbone kind of right here. Alright, so now we're going to paint the background. And first I'm going to use like a 1-inch brush, and then I'm going to take it and I'm going to squeeze out any excess water that's still kind of trapped inside. And then for right now, I'm going to start off like this is like a night sky. I'm going to assume for my Spider-Man is going to be on top of a building. We're going to keep this real simple. Now, like I said, if you want him on the beach, or like I said, you want him, like I said, in someone's bedroom, that's between you and God. But like I said, I'm just going to go simple with the simple night sky. And again, I'm going to use this 1-inch kind of brush right here. And then I want like a nice textured background, so I'm going to make these little X motions kind of all over the canvas. Now if you want a nice smooth background, you can start from a corner and just kind of go from side to side, kind of just like that. That'll give you a nice smooth background. But again, you can always kind of abandon it and go either method. Just kind of rough it up real good. Now this is just a simple combination of white and blue, and I'm getting less and less white as I kind of make my way around Spider-Man's head. Now I'm going to do a little bit of course correction right here, kind of round his head out a little more. It's kind of crazy, we're in like zombie times right now. Not that people are getting up from the dead, but more in the sense that like people are like in denial about their getting sick, and they're gonna be that person that gets bit and doesn't tell the group. You know, things seem to be pretty chill right now. Just stay indoors. And I hope that everyone is taking this quarantine incredibly serious. Now, as you're painting though, if you notice that this is happening, kind of where the canvas is showing up underneath, all that means is there's not enough paint in your brush. Don't be afraid to just glob it on there. Like I said, it is like the one thing Walmart has that they're not buying up right now. Everybody wants toilet paper right now. Nobody wants paint. Again, just don't be discouraged if you get inside the lines a little bit. Better for you to have a little bit of paint inside the lines than to have this little white border going around the whole thing and it looking funky. Once you feel like you have a good section of blue, you can start adding little bits of black. Now for that, what you want to do is you want to dip into the blue paint and then take the very corner of your brush and dip it into the black paint. I'm going to say that again, take the very corner of your brush and dip it into the black paint. So like I said, this is like pepper. It's always easier to add more than to take it off once it's already in there. And then just maintain whatever brush strokes you were doing. I kind of want a little bit more black, especially in this corner. So again, I'm going to start adding a little more black, going over the line just a little bit. And you want to work up into the original color until you can't tell where one color starts and the next color ends. And I even want it to go somewhere up. Now, since this is acrylic paint, it is going to dry up pretty quickly. And so by the time you get back to the other side, it may dry up. So kind of just dip into your original blue and kind of re-wet all this area over here to make it a nice slick surface so you can really start to get in there with that black paint and just kind of blend everything together. And while I'm filling this in, let's cut to some chickens in my backyard. Hey, let me film you. Come here, let me film you. And again, too, as you start to kind of get over here, kind of give yourself a nice little buffer zone. Make sure you hit him with the shoulders. And again, maintain whatever brush strokes, because if you're going crisscross over here and then you start going smooth over here, it's going to look weird. I mean, I know this is, I get it, this is an abstract painting, so it's impossible for them to be bad. And don't get me wrong, some of them are just going to be a little bit more abstract than others. But you still want to kind of maintain your original brush strokes. Unless that's what you're going for, then by all means don't listen to me. What do I know? I'm just some guy on the internet. You can find one of those on Craigslist. It's the end of the world. Who cares? But you never know though. We all may die, and scientists may be excavating this part of the city, and your painting will be a representation of art from this time period. So no pressure. If it's not really blending that well, if you have to kind of dip it back into your water, and this time just kind of push it on the side of the cup, tap away a bunch of that excess water. Don't squeeze it out with the napkin this time. Just kind of wipe away a bunch of the water, because you still want some wet, a little bit of water in that brush, because it'll help you kind of get in there and you can blend just a little easier. Let me just lean a little closer so I can get some more camera time. Yeah, that's good. Now, once you are kind of relatively happy with the way your background looks, the best thing you can do is just stop touching it. I know that you want to just keep kind of doing it, but stop. Overworking your painting can be just as bad as not doing enough. In fact, the more you tend to work all these colors, the more you're going to lose all your different color changes, and it's just going to be one big gray smear. Now, something you can do while you're waiting for the background to dry off is you can do the stars. Now, there's two ways you can do them. One is the splatter method, and the other one is just using the back of one of the brushes. Now, for the splatter method, you want to start off by kind of doing something similar to when you wanted to cover up a mistake with water. Once you, instead of using the napkin to kind of squeeze all the water out of your brush, just kind of push it on the side of your cup, and then you want to mix it around on the edge of your white paint. And if you have to add just a little bit more water, you want it to kind of be like that where it's starting to drip down the plate. And then once you kind of have that brush loaded, you just want to lightly run your finger along, like I said, those bristles. And that's kind of how you get all those stars off in the night sky. If for some reason you end up with something like that, don't freak out. Just kind of take your napkin or paper towel or your regular towel or your rag, and you want to kind of just gently tap away on some of those stars. I would kind of wipe away a bunch of that excess white paint. And then again, you want to use that big brush, squeeze out any excess water with the napkin, and then take some of your darker colors and just go right back in. Use the same brush strokes that you had used in your background. Like I said, cover them up like they never happened. And then once you kind of have the background on there, you can dip back in to that watery star paint that we'd made, and then you just reapply those stars. Because if it's clumping like that, chances are you didn't make the paint thin enough. So again, just kind of dip the brush back into the water and run it into that white paint. It's like you want it to almost be dripping down the plate. And just gently. Alright, now the second technique to doing stars is you want to use the back of one of your smallest brushes. Now again, I want to say that again. You want to use the back of the brush. If you use the front, you're going to push too hard and they're going to look funky. And so all you got to do is you like to use the back of the brush, dip it into white, or if you want to add yellow or something like that, by all means dip into whatever you want. Now the key with these is that you don't want to make it look too grid-like, and just gently kind of pepper in a couple stars. These are going to be the stars that are just a little closer. Yeah, and two, sometimes it kind of helps to take a step back from the whole thing, because see, if I get really close to it, all you can kind of see is mistakes. But once you start to pull away, you see the entire image, and you're like, "Oh, it's a little heavy on stars right over here. Maybe I need to put one right there, or right there, or right there, or right there, and right there, and right there, and right there, and right there." Alright, now to make this painting just a little less boring, I kind of want to add, since it's nighttime, I want to put the moon up here in this corner, somewhere where it's just a little bit brighter. And now there's a couple ways you can draw your moon. You can either, if you're a math teacher, you can sit there and you can paint the circle and slowly fill it in. Or if you can't draw a circle like me, you can sit there and start off small and then just slowly expand. Now remember, it is always easier to make your circle bigger than smaller, so keep that in mind. Again, too, this is your, as Bob Ross would say, this is your moon. You can make it look as big or as small as you want to. You can even make it a crescent moon if you want. But really what you're going for is something that looks relatively circular, which I've kind of got. Anyway, so once you have something that's relatively circular, you want to start to slowly add some little bits of blue or green or red or whatever color you want. Like I said, it's your painting. You can do whatever. You just want to take this. I'm using a slightly smaller brush, and I'm just lightly taking that blue paint. And you want to wipe the excess on the side of the plate. And then I just want to pick the darker side of the moon, hug the edge, and then just lightly kind of sponge painting on some craters. And again, you just want, with this step, less is always more, because if you do screw it up, you're going to have to wait until it dries off to add just a little bit more white. And see, I've already put in a little too much blue, so I'm just going to keep going in a circle. I'm just lightly tapping. The lighter you tap, the more gaps you'll get in between the brush. Like I said, the lighter you start tapping, the more air is in between the bristles. You'll have some slightly lighter sections of your moon. You can come back in to what's already on the canvas and just really blend it in there. And if you have to, you can even add just a little bit of black. So we can turn this into 50 shades of gray. And again, less is more. Know when to stop. Set it down. Take a breath. Catch your breath. Like, do whatever you do. And as days go by, and the water hold me down. And as days go by, water crashing all around. Alright. Again, that's all you get for right now. Something else that we can do is we can add a little tree kind of right over here. As Bob Ross would say, our tree's going to be sad as shit though. It's not going to be happy. That's why Spider-Man's here. Now, if you have brown, use brown. I forgot to get brown from the store, so I'm going to make my own with a little bit of red and green. Yeah, that's right, those Christmas colors, when they come together, they form brown. And add a little bit of black just to make it a little darker. I'm using a round brush. Now, trees follow a couple simple principles. The first is that they need to be, all of your branches and your trunks need to be thinner on the top than they are at the bottom. Like I said, you can have that branch kind of coming out of wherever. Just because if you were to do something else, like this would fall and collapse under its own weight. But like I said, you can fix it very easily just by thickening the rest of the branch and then going in, thickening out the trunk if you have to. Now, if you want to turn this into Groot, by all means, but I don't have time for that shit. So we're going to go in and we're going to add just a little bit of branches kind of coming out. If you have to switch down to a smaller brush to do these outside branches, by all means, but I'm pretty awesome, so I think I'm going to stay with this one. And again, I'm just going to have a couple branches kind of going over Spider-Man's head. Maybe one kind of going down into it. And again, all of your branches need to make the letter Y. Just because if you try to use a different letter, that's a cactus. And it looks just as awkward when you do it up here. So again, no right angle. Smooth it out if you have to. Thicken out the branch. But no right angles. If you're having trouble kind of drawing branches, sometimes some people find it easier to give themselves these little data points, kind of plan out where the tree is going. Now, don't just connect the dots. It'll look like a palm tree coming out of the side of your tree. Just lightly kind of go in and let that brush just kind of wave as it goes down. And again, round these corners out. Come in. make the branch as thick as it needs to be. My general advice is, again, take a step back, see, we've got 3 branches. I need to add way more because most of these are getting covered up, but we want to kind of have the freedom to putting leaves and branches or leaves kind of wherever we want. So we want to kind of go in. This has nothing to do with while we're painting, but I got kicked out of the recorder concert when I was in like 4th grade. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but I just felt like sharing that. Alright, so now I'm switching down to, again, a smaller brush, which there's no shame in. Not the size of the brush, it's how you use it. So again, I'm dipping into that green and red combination, and I'm going to add just a few more trees kind of off in the background. Because I don't know why Spider-Man's in the woods, but I'm sure he's got a good reason. So we're just going to add a few more trees kind of off here in the distance. Or if you got some stars you just couldn't cover up. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and paint some foliage in this background just to make these trees look a little less ominous. So we're going to go ahead and pull that big brush out of the water, and we're going to use that napkin to squeeze out any excess paint and water. And this time we're going to mess up the tips of those bristles, and we're going to dip them into our green paint. You can add little bits of white or add little bits of blue. Mostly it's going to be right in the green, and you want to kind of like tap that corner really good, mess the tip of that brush up, and then kind of anywhere you don't like, you're just going to start lightly kind of just tapping. Now when you're on the branch, you want to kind of tap a little hard, make the cluster a little thick. As you kind of start to back away, kind of start tapping lighter and lighter, and then again we'll put more gaps in between your brush strokes, and your tree will just look a little more natural. Because again, as you start to break away, again, any connection you don't like, you can put foliage right on top of it and have some of it kind of going into Spider-Man. And just remember, the harder you start hitting it, the more glob-like it's going to be. And if you feel like it's turning all one color, kind of add the opposite color. If you think it's turning too light, add little bits of black or little bits of blue. But like I said, if it's turning too light, you can start lightly kind of tapping in just a little bit of black paint. And I picked up a little bit of white, just a little bit of gray. It's like the light kind of bouncing off the leaves. And just a little bit. Just tapping. And again, as you start to fill this in, take a step back, look at the whole image, and then you're like, okay, we need to add a little bit more in here. Fill in this area in here. These trees, I like to think he's in Central Park, stopping a mugging, or if he's in the woods somewhere, maybe he got invited to a bonfire, something like that. Again, it's whatever you want it to be. If doing all these leaves and stuff is driving you kind of nuts, kind of stop what you're doing, move over to a different spot. Like say you want to kind of do these trees over here, and start lightly kind of going in, kind of tapping all this excess over here. And you want to kind of just lightly kind of tap along the base of Spider-Man's shoulder. Because like I said, these little trees and bushes right here are going to hide, so it doesn't look like the tree is growing out of his shoulder. And you're just kind of mashing it, and again, the less again is more with this, because again, the more you tap on it, the more it's all going to turn into one big blob. So if you have to add some of your darker tones, add some of your darker tones. I picked up just a little bit, so we're going to move over to the other side. Again, just a little bit of green. Just a little bit of green, a little bit of blue. You can make these look whatever shape you want. If you want pine trees, cypress trees, or weeping willow, that kind of comes down like that everywhere. But again, I don't gonna cover that shit right up. And I'm gonna have some branches kind of coming down along his shoulder. But not completely, because the more uniform everything looks, the faker it looks. So kind of keep that in mind. You want to kind of try and shut off that OCD part of your brain that makes everything have to be nice and perfect. You just want to lightly, yeah, I'm starting to add a little bit of highlights to my bushes right here. Like I said, the moon is coming in this way, and so it's going to create a shadow behind the trees. You can always do that over here. Now, if for some reason you get a color somewhere where it's not supposed to be, like you don't like, oh, that's too much white, you kind of always let it dry off, and then go back in and dab it like it never happened. Now comes the fun part. We're actually going to fill in Spider-Man's costume. Now, hit the webbing right now. We're just going to paint it like he's wearing a unitard. And again, use whatever brush you feel comfortable with. I'm going to use a flat brush that's just a little smaller. And, ooh, oh, shit. That only happens on the first date. It's just going to be mostly red. And I'm going to start filling in his actual costume. Now if you see like the background starting to show up, you can always swipe in just a little bit of black with your red, make it just a little darker. Like I said, that black paint should kind of help cover up anything that's underneath it. And again, if you feel like you've added too much black paint to the canvas, just kind of wipe out your brush with that napkin, and just using your clean dry brush, dip back in just your straight up red. And start from the bottom, just like Drake, and come swooping in. And then worst case scenario, just let it dry off and go over it with some of your original red once it's nice and dry. Because now if you're actually going to mix in little bits of white, you want the lighter part of the red to be kind of over here, because this is going to be our light source. Remember, this is Spider-Man creeping through the forest. So again, this is going to be the lighter side, but we're just going to come in, reestablish Spider-Man's jawline. Again, once you have that base layer on there, just move on to the rest of the outfit. So I'm going to start to kind of fill in the neck right here. Again, hitting those lats. I'm going to swipe in just a little bit of kind of darker paint. I like to kind of take some darker kind of paint along these little lines right here. Some good kind of highlight, some low light shadows to kind of help give it just a little bit more depth. And since the sun or the moon is coming from right here, the neckline is going to be very dark. And then the spots in the neck that would hit the sun or hit the moonlight are going to be a little bit brighter than those corresponding shadowy areas where the moon's just not quite hitting it. That's what she said. Again, I'm just lightly kind of adding less and less black paint and letting all those darker tones just kind of blend together. And again, since there's collarbones are going to be about right here, you want to add some of that dark red and then some lighter red kind of right underneath it. So like I said, the moon is kind of bouncing off the shoulder right here. Now too, you want to kind of, when you're going from white to black paint, you always want to make sure you rinse the brush out really good, or you run the risk of turning a gray version of whatever you're trying to put on the canvas. And again, for right now, we're just adding mostly red. And you want to get darker as you come this way, because again, this is the light source and the light's coming this way on and hitting Spider-Man right in the back. And again too, once you start to hit this corner, you want to start to add more and more of that black paint. Like it's going to turn into the dark kind of burgundy color. And now that the face is kind of dried up, we can go back in and, like I said, I'm going to start with the lighter part of the face, which is over here. I'm just lightly now going over it with a second layer, kind of fill in any gaps with our brush strokes, and you can kind of use it for your shading. This is where you can kind of really give your Spider-Man some expression. Spider-Man's not pink. Unless you want him to be pink, then by all means, that's not what I meant, but I'm just saying, traditionally, Spider-Man is red and blue. And again, so I'm going to start with the lighter side. So now I'm just going to take the corner of my brush and dip it into my white paint. And then swipe it on the plate a couple times, because then now we can come back in and add just little bits of those highlight colors if we kind of took too many away. So the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to actually do the lines and the webbing in the face. Now for that, you want to use your thinnest brush possible. You want to wipe off any excess water. And now this one, what you want is some really watery black paint. Now this one particularly kind of comes watery already, but you want that kind of soupy consistency. It's going to be the easiest to write with. You want it to be almost like you're writing with ink. And now, like I said, you want to essentially build your web the same way a spider would. And they all start right here in the center. And so, like I said, I always kind of like to start with the ones right in the middle of the face. And again, you just lightly just kind of drag that brush to the corners of the face. And again, and you can have one that starts right up here, or some variations of the costume kind of have that. Again, it's your Spider-Man, you can do whatever you want. And again, it helps to do the ones down here along the face. Now if you end up pushing down too hard, you're going to have to let it dry off and then go back over it with your red until you can't see the lines anymore, and then go back in and do the rest of the lines. That meant something totally different back in the 80s. And once you feel like you kind of have enough, you want to start to connect all the webs. And to that, you're just making little U shapes depending on kind of where you're at. So just like that, little U, and you just kind of go up. Now too, if you do end up messing up in certain areas, like right here, you can always dry it off and go back over it with some red paint. And once you feel like I want this particular Spider-Man to have like a slight outline kind of around his head. That way it kind of helps break up any kind of continued brush strokes. Now again, I'm not just outlining it, I'm kind of letting the brush naturally run out of paint as I'm coming around. And I'm not, because you don't want to kind of completely cut it off from the head. And again, I'm just lightly kind of coming in just like that. I can reestablish kind of where I'm going to start with the outline just so I can kind of see where I'm going, and it helps drawing the rest of the webbing. Alright, so now we're doing, like I said, we're doing the webbing in his chest. And again, I like to kind of start with the outlines and stuff because it kind of helps see the direction you're supposed to kind of draw the webbing in. And again, this is kind of where the collarbone is, shoulder. Same thing over here. This is where the kind of the collarbones are meeting each other. Come up like this. Alright, so now we kind of have that established. Now we can go in and do all the webbing in the chest. Now I like to kind of start off with the lines in the neck. And again, this one's going to come kind of just straight down. Same thing with this one over here. And again, if you end up having to add extra for right now, just kind of maintain and be consistent. So that's going to be the difference between the webbing looking natural and the webbing looking like a third grader did. Alright. So now the lines in the chest, they're essentially the same thing. Now I kind of like the way these turned out. I'm not going to add any in between anymore because like, it kind of turned into a nightmare on the face a little bit. So now I'm going to come in and just do all the little kind of connecting lines. And you're going to have a couple kind of go up underneath the jawline. Again, this step can be super tedious, but it's probably the simplest, and it can make or break the painting. I feel like I should be saying something right now, but I'm so focused on trying to draw these stupid webs. And again, so you can always go back over lines that you don't like. You want to make them just a little thicker. So now we're going to take this a step further though, and we're going to highlight and low light some of these things. So I'm going to take that same small brush, add little bits of blue now, maybe even little bits of blue and white, a nice light kind of grayish color. And I'm going to add just a couple of highlights to certain lines. Again, just kind of just naturally picking spots. Yeah, I'm not just like going over everything. I'm just adding little tiny highlights and lowlights in random spots. And again, as I'm making my way towards the darker side of his chest and stuff, I'm adding more and more of just blue and black and less white. Now we have all the red kind of redone. We're going to go in and like I said, just kind of redo our webbing. And like I said, this webbing, if you can still see it underneath, you can just call it shadow. And we're going to start off with kind of just re-establishing these little web lines right here. And for Spider-Man's eyes, you can use whatever brush you feel comfortable with. I'm going to use that round brush we did the tree with. So again, for right now, I'm going to dip into just the white. And I'm going to reestablish the shape of my actual eyes. Now that I have all that wet white on there, I'm going to lightly take the very tip of the brush, just the tip, and then you want to just lightly run it along the darker side of the lens, which is going to be that side that's furthest away from that moon. And you want to lightly kind of dip back into your white, just so you can go in and blend everything together. Just a little bit of white and a little bit of blue. Wipe it on the plate. And you want to pick the side that's close, or the furthest from your light source, which is going to be that moon right there. And if you feel like you've added too much blue, again, wipe out what's in your brush and then just dip straight up white. Start from the outside, kind of slowly kind of make your way in. Start from the outside, kind of slowly upward. So now we're going to finish off the eyes by adding the outline that's around everything now. The outline kind of is close to the web. I'm using this little small brush right here. I'm going to start from the center of the eyes, and I'm going to slowly get wider as I kind of get towards the end of the eye. You have to go back over it a couple times. Like I said, this step is really good for cleaning up any kind of excess kind of paint lines. It's the same thing right here. You start off super small, super skinny, and you want to get super wide from the outside. And again, depending on how wide you made your webbing and stuff on the actual costume, will kind of determine how thick you need to make this, but it's entirely up to you. You just have to be consistent and do it to the other side of the eye over here. And again, it's the same thing over here. You just take this one on and kind of connect the dots. And the very last thing you want to add, at least I like to add, is just a little bitty kind of lip right here. Just to kind of help tie everything together. And again, you want to be consistent. Do the same thing on the other side. Oh wait, that's X-Men. Now what I like to add on top of all this are some highlights, especially because when you have this black on black paint, it all kind of washes together. So I want just some really subtle gray, and mix in just a little blue, but mostly gray. And again, I'm just highlighting. Kind of certain parts of the yeah, you're not just outlining, you're just slowly kind of highlighting certain areas. And the best thing about the highlights is if you don't like the way they look, always just take some black paint and erase them like they never happened. But don't be afraid to kind of just try a few things. You know, just like that time in college you don't tell anybody about. when you're kind of planning out where to put the actual symbol, you gotta remember his head's here, is up here, and so like this is gonna be like this is like halfway through his chest right here. So his chest comes down just a little bit further down in here. So the head of the spider is gonna be somewhere about right, kind of in here. And then, like I said, your body of this, like a spider is not an insect. It only has two real parts, just a head and an abdomen. I guess is what I think it's what that's called. Science. So for right now, that's just my basic shape, and then I'm gonna come in and add little fangs and stuff like that. Kind of change the shape of the head, and then once you kind of get it to where you want it, go ahead and just fill in the whole shape. And you can change the way the body looks too. Alright, so now that I have the body done, I'm going to go ahead and do the legs. Now remember, spiders only have 8 legs, which means there's going to be 4 on each side. I kind of like to do a 2 and 2 thing, which means I'll start off with the bigger legs, kind of out here. Now the other thing too, you want to make sure that, again, you're consistent. So there's one leg, and again the other leg. Coming down. Like once I have the big 4 on there, I'm going to come in and then do the little 4. And then once you have the actual legs on there, you can go in, change the shape up, thicken them out. And remember, just the harder you push down, the thicker that line gets. And 2 to go. Now remember, it doesn't really matter how you make the legs look, you just have to be consistent. Kind of just push down. Same thing right here. Just kind of push it down. What you did up here. Now I didn't quite have enough room to do all 8 legs. And again, everyone's is going to be a little bit different. If you can only get 2 legs in there on each side, and like I said, that's all you can do. So you don't want to compromise the whole thing, trying to squeeze in just a little bit of extra little bit. And then once you have your basic silhouette on there, and then just like everything else, I'm going to go in and highlight. Now I'm going to again use just a dark gray, because we don't want to add too much blue, because I don't want it to kind of contrast with the blue that's on the webbing. And again, you're just adding a little bitty kind of tiny lines, kind of wherever, just lightly. Like I said, these highlights can kind of help differentiate all the different spaces, and you can kind of add more details in the symbol. Just lightly highlighting. And then just like that. Now the only thing you have left to do is just to sign it. Like I said, you can write whatever you want. If you want to write your name, your initials, or some weird symbol, that's fun. Like I said, if you're embarrassed about the way the painting turned out, put someone else's name on there. Thank y'all for tuning in to the very first episode of Dirty Brushing. I am your host, Jonathan Jernigan, and this was a lot of fun. I've been drawing Spider-Man since I was in middle school, and this has been a long time coming. I'm planning on making plenty more of these videos, so give us a like or subscribe or whatever viewing platform this is on. Follow us, and because next time, Star Wars.